started. So good morning, everybody. If you are just joining us, we have got a lot of stuff to do today. We are wrapping up this section. And after we do this section, you guys should be ready to do your entire homework. In fact, you should already be ready to do about 90% of your homework before this. But we are talking about intercept form. So this is a third way. Now, converting to and from vertex form is what we're going to talk about first. We're also going to try and review a little bit of everything. We have a third form called intercept form. Alone, each one of these are actually pretty simple. When we throw them all together, that's when people start to get confused. Now, if they ever say convert from vertex to standard form, all you're going to do is one, FOIL it out first. Two, distribute A. And three is combine like terms. So this is something that, again, is pretty simple. You should know how to do it, but there's a couple small mistakes that are made. So if I ever ask you to convert from vertex to standard form, the very first thing you have to do is FOIL this out. Do not make any silly mistakes here. So if I've got the quantity of x plus 2 being squared, what that really means is this. And don't forget about this plus 1 on the side. So when people, and I say they make silly mistakes, they'll FOIL it out and then they'll forget to combine like terms, or they won't FOIL it out correctly. So if you've ever got a quantity squared, that means you have the quantity twice. And some of you guys know this, some of you do not, but I'm going to kind of give you guys a shortcut here, and it's not really a shortcut. It is what it is. And by it is what it is means we're going to focus on how to distribute that anytime you've got a like squared or to the third or something. But x times x is x squared. X times 2 is 2x, but you always have 2 of those middle terms. So because these will always be the same when you're squaring it, 2 times 2 is 4, I'm going to give you guys a kind of a heads up of how to do this. So we FOILed, we didn't have an a to distribute because a was just 1. So I've got x squared plus 4x plus 4, but do not forget about this, plus 1. So my entire answer is x squared plus 4x plus 5. Any questions? All right. So let me say this again. And I know I didn't give a lot of time. Whenever you are squaring something, you square the first term. Then you take 2 times whatever this term is, times whatever this term is. So 2 times x is 4x. That's how we got the 4x. And then square the last term. So it's always going to be plus, square the last term. So plus 2 squared is 4. So it's always 2 times this term times this term. So let's try it again. In fact, why don't you guys take about 30 seconds and see if you can go ahead and FOIL this out on number 2. About 10 more seconds. All right. So again, we square the first term, So I've got x squared. Then I take 2 times this term times this term. So 2 times negative 3 is negative 6 times x is negative 6x. And then negative 3 squared is plus 9. Any questions on how I did that? If you are completely lost, then go ahead and just multiply it out. X minus 3, x minus 3, x squared minus 3x plus 9, you'll get the same answer. I'm just trying to save you guys a little time. So FOIL first. Step 2 is to distribute. So when I distribute that negative 2 to everything in the parentheses. Again, don't make a silly mistake and try and distribute it to the 5. Minus 18 plus 5. And then combine like terms. Those last two, combine them, so your entire answer is any questions?
Wait, sorry, I'm confused.
Yeah.
How'd you get the first, like the?
How'd I get this part right here?
Yeah, I'm confused right there. Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing you have to do, if you don't quite understand how I got this, whenever you've got a quantity squared, that means that you have the whole quantity twice, right? So you're gonna have to FOIL this out.
Okay.
Now you can do that without actually writing it twice, because what the formula is you square the first term, so x squared, then you take 2 times both terms. Let me erase this so you can see. When you take 2 by both terms, so you take 2 times this term, 2 times negative 3 is negative 6 times x, and that's how I got negative 6x.
Okay.
And why it's times 2 is because you have this term, x times negative 3, and negative 3 times x. You always have 2 times the first term times the second term. Always.
Okay.
Now, that's it for number 2. Number 3, it's no more difficult, but I did put a fraction there. So take a second and see if you can FOIL it out and deal with that. So do number 3, take about 30 seconds, do number 3, go. All right, that was 30 seconds. So the first thing I want to do, is FOIL this out. So when I FOIL it out, square the first one. 2 times 1 times x. Square the second one. 1 squared is 1. Any questions about that? Distribute. And here's the part that people hate. When I'm distributing a half, keep it as a fraction. 1/2 times 2 is 1 x. 1/2 times 1 is plus a half minus 3. If you hate fractions, use a calculator. But get comfortable with this. In order to add or subtract fractions, you have to have a common denominator. So my denominator is a 2. So if I multiply it by 2 and put it over 2, that's really going to be minus 6/2. Combine your like terms. My entire answer is this. Now, one thing I absolutely do not want is this. If you wrote it like this, that is unacceptable, and only for one reason. Does anybody know why that's unacceptable? Anybody have a guess why that's unacceptable?
It's a decimal?
Well, because you can't have a fraction and a decimal in the same equation or expression. So it either all needs to be decimals or it all has to be fractions. And it will help you to use a decimal or a fraction instead of a decimal because we kind of know how to use a. This minus 2.5, we don't really want the decimals. So keep it as a fraction. Again, it wouldn't be wrong if you wrote it as 0.5x squared plus x minus 2.5. If you wrote it like this, it's fine. But I'd much, much, much rather you write it like this. All right. Now, due to time, we have to move on here. So hopefully that makes sense. You need to practice that a little bit. But here's number 2. What if we're trying to go from standard form to vertex form? All you have to do is find your vertex and your a value and plug it into the equation. Take a second, write this down. And then I want you to start by listing what is your vertex. By the way, does anybody remember from last week, how do I find the x coordinate for my vertex? It's the opposite of something over something.
Negative b over 2.
To a. So that's how you find your x coordinate. So once you've written this down, I want you guys to take about a minute, if you need to, write down your a, b, and c, the 3 steps, and then find your vertex. So opposite of b over 2a is how you find your h value. Thirty more seconds. All right. So what's my b value here? We might have to go through and label a, b, and c. You're not going to see me do this really again today, but what's my a value here?
Negative 2.
Perfect, -2. So that is the a value. So we already know the a value. So in this one, a is -2. Well, what's my b value?
Negative 8.
Well, it's 8 right now, and my c value is -25. So the opposite of b is -8 over 2 times a, which is
Negative 2.
-4, which gives me +2. So that is my h value. Remember, your vertex, that's your h value. So I know a and h. Now I have to find k. So how do I find my vertex? How do I find k? What do?
You plug it in to all the x.
Exactly. So plug it back in anywhere you see an x. Two squared is 4 times -2 is -8 plus 16 minus 25 gives me -17, and that is my k value. Any questions so far? So remember, you have to square before you distribute. So once I found my a value, which this is still your a value, once I found my a value and my vertex, now I can just plug this back in. So if I want to just plug this back in, y equals, my a value is -2, If my h value is 2, what goes in my parentheses? My h value is 2, so what goes in my parentheses? Plus 2 or minus 2?
X minus 2.
Perfect. And my k value is negative 17. It stays how it is. Pretty simple. Find your vertex, find your a value, and go. Take a second and do number 2. And by a second, you should be able to do number 2 in about 30 seconds. So find your vertex, and then write it out. Go. All right. So let's do this. First of all, I already wrote your a, b, and c value in. So what's my a value again?
1.
1.
1.
Perfect. Again, that's just your a value. By the way, does this open up or down?
Up.
How do you know it opens up?
Because the A is positive.
Oh, because a is positive, so if it opens up, then is your vertex a maximum or minimum value then?
Minimum.
Perfect. It's a minimum value because it opens up. That means that's the lowest point here. Now, let's keep going. That was just a quick review from Friday. So opposite of b over 2a, the opposite of b is positive 6 over 2 times 1 is 2. So my h value is just 3. My k value, plug it back in. Nine minus 18 is negative 9, plus 7 is negative 2. And my final answer is y equals, my a value is 1. I can put a 1 there, but I don't need to. What goes in the parentheses this time?
X minus 3.
And minus 2 on the outside. Any questions? Remember, it's always the opposite of what h is. So if h is positive, it goes in as a negative. If it's negative, it would go in as a positive. Oh boy. What about number 3? I'm going to do number 3 with you pretty quickly. What is my a value here?
-1/2.
Perfect. Now, opposite of b over 2a, the opposite of b is negative 3. What is 2 times negative 1/2?
Negative 1.
Perfect. Again, if you're multiplying here, 2 times negative 1/2 is 2 times negative 1, which is negative 2, divided by 2 is negative 1. So I find out right away, negative 3 over negative 1, my h value is 3. K value, plug it back in. Again, have your calculator handy, but learn how to deal with these fractions. So I have negative 1/2 times 3 squared plus 3 times 3, which is 9, minus 1. 3 squared is 9 times negative 1/2. It's negative 9/2. The whole reason I'm doing this is just so you guys understand how to deal with this fraction. I need a denominator of 2. So if I multiply that by 2, it's plus 18 over 2 minus 2 over 2. get a common denominator. Once the denominators are the same, add or subtract the numerator. So negative 9 plus 18 is 9, minus 2 is 7. My denominator is 2. And because this is a fraction, this has to be a fraction. My entire answer is this. Any questions? All right, I know I've gone kind of quick. You can come back and watch this again, but I need to make sure we get to the last thing because we're kind of moving on tomorrow. We have a third form. It is called factored form or intercept form. Write this down. Again, this is really the same type of thing, except for this time, it's just telling you where it crosses the x-axis, which is why it's called your intercept form. It is finding your x-intercepts. And one thing I want to point out, and I know some of you guys are writing this down and some of you are not. Either way, I hope you get this and you know it. P and Q, it is, again, always the opposite of what is happening to X. Your A value is still out in front. This is telling you exactly where it crosses the x-axis. So P and Q are your x-intercepts, also called your zeros. Well, just for good measure, what if I have this x minus 1, x plus 7? What do you think my x-intercepts are? What are my zeros here? What do you think they are going to be? Somebody tell me.
Um, 1 and negative 7.
That's exactly right. That's it. Remember, it's the opposite of what's happening to X every single time. And what that means is I know that this graph is going to cross at 1 and negative 7. And my A value here was 1. So does this open up or open down?
Up.
So I know it has to, my vertex has to be somewhere down here. So I know it has to look something like this. So this is yet another way to graph. Now, let's go through and let's do this again. So if I'm at x minus 1, x plus 7, you just told me that my zeros, my P and Q, are positive 1 and negative 7. To find your axis of symmetry or your H value, you just add them up and divide by 2. So my vertex would be at negative 3, and then I need you guys to see this. Negative 3, to find your K value, you still just plug it back in anywhere you see an X. So to find K, I'm going to plug it in right here, negative 3 minus 1, and negative 3 plus 7. What is negative 3 minus 1?
Negative 4.
And negative 3 plus 7 is positive 4. So my K value is negative 16. Now, let's go ahead and do number 1 and number 2 together, and let's talk about everything we know. We have plenty of time. We've got about 18 minutes left. Let's start by finding the zeros. So on example number 1, where are your zeros? So P equals, and Q equals. What's my P value here?
-1.
And my Q value is
-3.
+3. Change
I mean,
the
+3. I'm sorry. Yeah.
You're okay. +3. So it's really actually pretty simple. This does not get hard until we give you all 3 of them at once, and then it's like, oh, crud, what do we do now? Remember, on your quiz on Friday, you guys have about 24 hours to do this. Not 24 hours. You've got till midnight. So you're going to have about 13 hours to do this. So you could always go back and watch the videos, look at the notes. We want to make sure that you know how to do this. So add them up. -1 plus 3 divided by 2. So what's your H value?
One.
It's just 1. What's your K value? All you have to do is plug it back in. What is 1 plus 1?
2.
And 1 minus 3 is -2. 2 times -2 is -4, and that's your vertex. Oh man, number 2 looks way harder. It's not really, but you might have a fraction. That's okay. Take a second and by a second, take about 30 seconds and do number 2. See if you can find your vertex for number 2. About 5 more seconds. All right, so number 2, where am I? First of all, before I even start, does this open up or down?
Down.
How do you know it opens down?
It's a -2 or -8.
Perfect, because your A is negative, I know it opens down. Where are my zeros at? In other words, what are my P and Q values? So my zeros are at
4 and 1.
4 and 1. All right, so how do I find my vertex? 4 plus 1 divided by 2. Oh man, I got another fraction. So that's my H value. Again, you can use your calculator, that's fine. But notice the theme of today has really been a lot of fractions. You see how this is 4? Multiply it by 2 and then put it over 2. That's a 1. Multiply by 2, put it over 2. So that's really going to be 8 halves, and this is 2 halves. 5 halves minus 8 halves is going to be -3 halves. 5 halves minus 2 halves is +3 halves. By the way, has anybody else noticed a pattern between these two values? They're always opposites. So when you multiply top to top, bottom to bottom, so -3 times 3 is -9. Top to top, bottom to bottom. then -2 times -4 is positive 18 over 4, which is 9 over 2. Now, if we were just graphing, I wouldn't give you something like this. It's ugly. It's 2.5, 4.5. I wouldn't do that. I'd keep it clean. But if I ask you what the vertex is, there you go. Your vertex is at 5 halves, 9 halves. When you are graphing, I only need, on this part, I only need your vertex and your intercepts. I don't need anything else. You don't have to do the A, so this is actually even easier. Now we've got a few minutes left. I just want to do 2 of these with you. I want to do, maybe we've got time to do all 3. So let's quickly do number 1. So I want you to start by finding your x-intercepts, then your vertex, then graph. Well, what are my x-intercepts on number 1? Or my zeros?
-5 and 3.
So -5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and positive 1, 2, 3. Well, that part's really easy. How do I find my vertex? I add them up and divide by 2. Plug it back in. Now you get -1 plus 5, which is 4. -1 minus 3 is -4, and I get -16. That's it. That's all I need you guys to do is find the vertex and find your x-intercepts. Now, number 2 is going to be a little more clean. And the reason I put number 3 up there is because you will see something like that, and it throws a lot of people off. So I do want you guys to take about a minute or so and try number 2 on your own. 1 minute, go. By the way, I do want to kind of address and say something. Sometimes, and I apologize, I know I'm going kind of quickly. If you ever don't understand something, please ask a question. But outside of that, I can't really slow it down, and for that I'm sorry. But the good news is you can always go back and watch the video. You can rewind or fast forward or go to whatever part you need to go that you didn't understand, and you can come to office hours. So I do understand that I go fast sometimes. By the way, your notes are always up. If you're struggling trying to take notes, they're always up. You can always download them before class, even if it's right before class, just so you can follow along. And we have to get through all of this stuff today because your quiz is on Friday and we've got one more section to do, which we need 3 days again. All right, so on this one, my x-intercepts are at what points?
Negative
Same
1
one.
and 3.
Perfect. -1 and +3. Does anybody have any questions about why those are your intercepts? Anybody at all? Okay. So to find your vertex, you just add them together, divide by 2. So my H value is +1. Plug it back in, and I've got -2 times 1 + 1 is 2, 1 minus 3 is -2, and multiply them all together. -2 times 2 is -4, times -2 is +8. That's it. So your H value is 1. Those are the only points you need. There you go. Again, any questions? Now, the one thing I'm going to really say is don't just forget this, because we're not really going to talk about it. We'll talk about it at the beginning of class tomorrow, but we're not really going to talk about this again until Thursday, when we can review for your quiz on Friday. Now let's do the last question. I don't even really want you to do this on your own, because this looks completely different. First of all, what do you think your A value is here?
2.
Yeah, this is just your A value. Now, some people have said, well, shouldn't I distribute this first? We don't need to, because this is the same thing as this. You will never see anybody write something like x minus 0, because x minus 0 is just x. So where are my 2 intercepts here?
Zero and +4.
Okay. Any questions about that? So if my x-intercepts are 0 and +4, then all I have to do is add them together and divide by 2, so I know that my H value is 2. Any questions about that? Then your last step is to plug 2 everywhere in UCNX. 2, 2, 2 minus 4. So 2 times 2 is 4, times -2 is -8. That's it. Any questions at all? All right, so I already went over about 5 minutes more than what I wanted to, but I wanted to make sure that everybody got a chance to see this. All right, you should completely be able to do your homework. I would try it before tonight if you haven't already. My office hours are tonight from 2:45 to 3:15. So if you don't have any questions, you guys can go ahead and log off. If you do have questions, you can stay on for a few more minutes or email me and I'll be here until 3:15. All right. Have a wonderful day, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.